Hi everyone, this is William from the Headphone Experience, and I'm here tonight with part 2 of my review of, and I hope I'm pronouncing it right this time because I think I got it wrong in my first video anyway, the Erzetich Bacillus Tilia. I think I pronounced it Erzetich on my first video. Anyway, this amp is made in Slovenia, but was shipped to me from Michigan, so it only took about 3 days to get to me here in the middle of the US. Anyway, it currently sells for 799 euros, which works out at today's exchange rate to about 896 US dollars. In my first video, I gave you a pretty good look at the amp, but I'll give you a second look in case you don't want to go back and watch my first video. Anyway, it has a thick aluminum faceplate on it. It's made of real handcrafted wood. It's linden wood, which I guess is pretty common in Slovenia. Anyway, it's about 5 inches wide, about 7 inches deep, including the volume knob and the inputs on the back. It's about 3 3/4 inches tall and it weighs about 2.5 pounds. On the front you have your volume control, which is a very solid feeling, very smooth. It's an Alps blue velvet potentiometer. You also have your single-ended headphone output, which is your standard 1/4 inch 6.3 millimeter. On the back you have one set of RCA inputs. They are the high quality type. They're not the type that's going to pull off if you have tight fitting RCA connections. You have your AC input and you have your on-off, your power switch on the back. Oh, on the top you've got a vent here, which a screen in it, and I'm guessing that's to release heat. But in all the time I've used this, I've never felt it get more than a couple degrees above room temperature, so heat doesn't seem to be an issue at all with this amp. The recommended headphone impedance is anywhere from 8 ohms to 600 ohms. So this is going to work with pretty much any headphone. The power output is rated at 181 milliwatts into 8 ohms and 161 milliwatts into 600 ohms, which is actually quite a bit of power into that high of impedance of headphone. The distortion rating is rated at 0.0002%, which is extremely low. I think that's lower than any other headphone amp I've ever seen. So that might account for the power rating being only 181 milliwatts at 8 ohms, because this amp seems to have a lot more power than that to me. I wasn't expecting this to be able to drive planar headphones at all or sound decent with them, and it actually does a very well job, or very good job, and I would say that this amp compares in power to other amps I've tested that are more up like at 1.25 watts. So I'm guessing that's just a really conservative power rating. This amp comes with a 5-year warranty, which is better than most companies, so that's a plus. My first video, I didn't get much into the sound of this amp, and that's pretty much what this second video is about. Dig deeper into the way this amp sounds now that I've had it for, I don't know, 6 or 7 weeks now. When I did my first video, I'd only had it a few days, so I just kind of touched on the sound a little bit. But anyway, for my testing and review of this amp, the other equipment I used was a Cambridge Audio 540C CD player as a transport only, running a digital signal out of that to a Benchmark Media DAC1, and then ran the single-ended output from that into the Bacillus Tilia. The first thing I would say about the sound of this amp is it's slightly on the warm side of neutral, but it is not dark at all. The treble is not rolled off at all, and it doesn't have a dark sound. I would say, the reason I would say it's slightly warm is I would say there's a slight, maybe 1 or 2 decibel emphasis on the bass. That would be with most headphones that I've tried. And the mid-range just has a solid, weighty, pretty much the opposite of thin sound to it. So I'll get a little more into that in a minute, but yeah, I would say slightly on the warm side of neutral, which is not a bad thing at all in my opinion. I really like the way this sounds. The bass, I would say, has good extension. It has good impact. It's punchy, it's solid, and it's tight. And even on very low impedance headphones, this amp seems to have good control of the bass and keeps it nice and tight, doesn't let it ever get sloppy or boomy or muddy. So good quality bass. The mid-range, I would say slightly on the warm side of neutral, sort of a smooth, silky sound to it. It's got a lot of body. Like I said a minute ago, this amp never sounds thin. Compared to some of the most neutral headphone amps, which I would say the Benchmark DAC 1 and probably the Audio GD Master 9 are probably the most neutral amps I've heard, and compared to those can sound a little bit dry in the mid-range sometimes, and this doesn't have that sound. It's more of a liquid, kind of a flowing sound. And the mids always, in my opinion, just sound natural and real from this amp. So I really like the way the mids sound, and although I would describe the mids as smooth, they're not lacking in detail at all. So I get more into that in just a second. The treble I would consider crisp and clean, with a little bit of sparkle to it. Never overly bright, but not lacking at all. I would say the treble is smooth and silky. Like I said, very clear and clean, but it never reaches the point of being harsh or fatiguing. I can listen to this amp for hours, and the treble never gets to me on it. But like I said, it's not rolled off at all. It's 100% there, the treble. It's just got a nice smooth sound to it, so it doesn't wear you out like the treble on some amps that are just can get a little bit harsh at times. The clarity, detail, and resolution of this amp I would consider excellent. Even compared to the most detailed amps, I don't feel like this is lacking anything at all. I don't feel like I'm missing any details. Just very, very clean and clear, especially the mid-range. Just every little detail is there. Nothing is ever missing. The Soundstage I would consider of average height and width. Not overly large, but not lacking at all. But I would say that the Soundstage probably has a little more depth and a little bit better layering than some amps I've heard. And I was listening to some Sarah McLachlan a couple hours ago with the Kennerton Thrower headphone plugged into this amp, and I was picking up not only good depth, but I was picking up at least 3 different layers to the depth. Her voice was at one layer, and then I heard instruments at least 2 more layers. So gave it a nice 3-dimensional sound, which I really enjoy. This amp really matches well with pretty much any headphone that I've tried with it. The impedance doesn't seem to matter. The efficiency doesn't matter until you get into really hard to drive headphones. I've tried it with a lot of different headphones, everything from the Grotto SR80E, the Meza 99 Classic, the Kennerton Valley, Hi-Fi Man HE500 and HE560, the Sundara, the Hi-Fi Man Aria, and the Kennerton's Roar. And it works well with almost all of these. Like I said, dead quiet, so no matter how efficient the headphone, I never pick up any background noise. The only headphones that I picked up any sort of shortcoming at all, and it worked, it worked absolutely fine with the Hi-Fi Man Sundara and the HE500. The Kennerton's Roar, which is also a planar headphone, it sounds great with this amp. When I got up to the Aria, I did notice, and I had to compare it to other more powerful amps to pick up on this. Listening to the Aria, it sounds really, really good. But if I compare it directly, to switch back and forth directly with a more powerful amp, like the Wells Audio Milo or the Audio GD Master 9, it does have just a slight, just a tiny little bit of lack of impact in the bass when compared to those. If I get up into the higher volumes. With that headphone, normal listening is probably at about 11 o'clock on the volume knob. If I get up to like 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock, which is getting pretty loud, it's just the slightest bit of lacking in bass impact compared to the more powerful amps. The Hi-Fi Man HE560, which is even harder to drive, and that normal listening would be about 12 o'clock and loud would be up at about 2 or 3 o'clock, sort of the same thing. It, especially getting up towards into the loud volumes, compared to the more powerful amps, it's lacking a little bit of impact and a little bit of solidness in the bass. But that's a really hard headphone to drive, and it's not that hard to get loud, but the HE560 definitely needs a lot of power to sound good. So I would say this amp is coming up a little bit short there. So, but anything from the most efficient headphones, even IEMs, anything up to medium efficiency, even planar headphones, this amp does really well and has plenty of power in my opinion, which is actually surprising considering it's only rated at 181 milliwatts into 8 ohms. But like I said, I think maybe that's just a really conservative power rating, because I would compare this I would say the power seems pretty close to my benchmark HPA2, which is in the built into the benchmark amps, and those are rated at a very clean 1.25 watts into 32 ohms, and this seems to be real close to that in power. Maybe not quite, but close to it. So I really wouldn't worry about this amp being short on power unless you're getting into really hard to drive planar headphones. Music wise, it seems to work with pretty much everything I throw at it. I've listened to rock, I've listened to jazz, I've listened to acoustical, I've listened to orchestral music, and most of you probably know by now if you've watched my videos, I really like acoustical music, really like female vocals, Sarah McLachlan, Tori Amos, I like Nora Jones, just anything acoustical with female vocals. But I really like the way this amp makes acoustical music and any vocals, but especially female vocals. It just gives them a little bit of weight and a little bit of a body where they never sound thin. So really like it for pretty much any type of music though. Compared to other amps and the way it sounds, I would say the two amps that this sounds the most similar to would be the Wells Audio Milo, which just has kind of a smooth musicality to it. This sounds similar to that, where the Wells Audio Milo excels at medium to super hard to drive headphones and has unlimited power. This one is better suited for your efficient headphones through medium hard to drive. And then the other amp that it sounds pretty similar to would be the first tube amp that I've had a chance to hear. A couple of weeks ago, I got a Felix Audio Echo, which is a OTL type tube amp, and it's the first tube amp that I've reviewed, and I would say that this amp sounds the closest to that of any amp I've reviewed so far. So I guess I could describe this as having sort of a tubey sound based on that, because like I said, the Echo does have a distinct tube sound, and I really do like it though. So you know, and I did a first review on that, first impressions, and I'm working on a more detailed review of that. And it's an amp I really like a lot, and of all the 7 or 8 amps that I've tried so far, this amp probably sounds the closest to that tube sound of any of them, but yet it's a solid state amp, so you don't have worry about tubes wearing out or anything like that, or being replaced. So anyway, as far as what I like and don't like about this amp, I can only come up with one very small issue with this amp, and I think I mentioned it in my first impressions, is the only thing that I have found that I don't exactly like, it's not really a problem, it can be dealt with pretty easily, is if you unplug or plug in your headphones with this amp on, even if the volume knob is at 0, even if your source is paused, you get a little bit of a pop in your headphones when you plug them in or unplug them. A more efficient headphone is going to be a little louder. A harder to drive headphone, you're barely going to notice it. Anyway, the only way but easy way to overcome this is you simply turn the amp off before you unplug the headphones. You reach over the top, you flip the power off, you wait about 2 seconds, you unplug your headphones, and there's no pop. Same thing plugging them in, you plug your headphones in first and then reach over the top, turn the amp on, and that problem is avoided, and it takes like about 2 hours of having this amp to realize that's what you need to do, and problem solved. The only other issue I would say, and it's not a problem in my opinion, and I'm not saying that this amp is overpriced, but at $896 US, it has a lot of competition. So whether this amp is better or hold its own with other amps at that price range, I can't tell you. I haven't really tested any amps in that price range. I've reviewed some cheaper amps, some more expensive amps, and I can't really tell you if it's competitive or not in that price range. I can tell you it's a great amp, and it works with pretty much any headphone of any impedance. Unless, like I said, not ideal with extremely hard to drive headphones, but otherwise very versatile, works with pretty much any type of music. It has a small footprint, doesn't take up much room. The real wood casing on this is going to look great on, you know, a nice wooden office desk, something like that. It's going to look great. And if you pair it with a pair of headphones, like say the Kennerton Valley that also have wooden ear cups, it's going to look really classy sitting on your desk. And yeah, I did want to mention, I think I mentioned it in my first video, that the Kennerton Valley is just a headphone that has great synergy with this amp. They just work really well together in my opinion. The Valley sounds probably as good from this amp as any other amp I've tried. And the Kennerton's Roar, which is their $3,500, almost $3,500 flagship headphone, also sounds really good with this amp. So, you know, this amp's capable of working with headphones that are in a quite a bit higher price range and still sounds good. So yeah, I can recommend this amp. I really like it, and like I said, just this one small issue with needing to turn it off before you unplug your headphones, and that's the only problem I can find with it. So 6-7 weeks with this headphone now, or with this headphone amp now, and I'm very impressed. I like it a lot, and wouldn't mind owning it myself. So anyway, I'm gonna wrap this up now. Once again, this is William from the Headphone Experience. If this video has helped you at all with your decision, please give me a thumbs up, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel. And I'd also like to have you all join us over at my headphone group, the Headphone Experience, on Facebook. And thank you very much. I appreciate you watching my video. Thanks.